on this episode of the Stinking Albatross Podcast.
As one former MP told me today, they just want a bunch of bobbleheads.
We should make bobbleheads and sell them as a fundraiser. It's not shocking that OLO would force him to release a statement, but it's shocking that he would agree to it. It's not going to be good for him or the Conservative base or the Conservative Party if this type of behavior continues.
People in Party HQ, they know that if they win that nomination, let's say that safe Conservative riding, are not going to be just brain dead, trained barking seals that are happy clappy in question period.
Today's episode is brought to you by LaRosse Media Incorporated. They make professional videos to fit any budget, so next time you need a commercial, promo, or corporate video, think LaRosse. Check them out at larossemedia.com. Hello and welcome to the Stinking Albatross Podcast. My name is Alissa Galobe and I'm here once again with my partner in crime, Scott Hayward. How's it going, Scott?
Good, Alissa. How are you?
Oh, I am absolutely splendid. Splendid indeed. How are you?
You already asked me that.
Oh. That's how splendid I am. I can remember the last 5 seconds.
I got my round 3 conference final predictions wrong. I got them right in that they were both 4-2 series, but I got them reversed. I thought it'd be Dallas and New York. Yeah. And now it's Florida and Edmonton. So do you have a prediction for the Stanley Cup final?
I'm just going to stick with Edmonton. Let's do it.
Yeah?
The
How
underdog.
many games do you think?
I think it would go till 7.
I think it goes to 7 too. Yeah.
It'll be interesting. My mother-in-law was here over the weekend, and her husband, my husband's stepfather, so my mother-in-law's husband, passed away at the beginning of the year, and he was a diehard Oilers fan, and he, that's one of the final things he was talking about was like the Oilers streak and making it to the playoffs, and I think it would be meaningful for her if they won the Stanley Cup. So that's like one of the reasons why I want them to win. But also I just want a Canadian team to win, and the Oilers have the most Canadians on their team in the NHL. So that's where my
Really? I thought that was Vegas. I thought
maybe it was in the playoffs. Maybe it was in the playoffs then.
Vegas was in the playoffs, but yeah, that still might be true.
Then no, it is Edmonton though, because I remember there are videos going around about how they have the most Canadians, and in the last like so many years, the team with the most Canadians always wins the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, that seems to be a definite trend. Does your husband agree?
No.
with your Oilers fandom? He must be out buying like Barkov jerseys and Bob jerseys.
Well, it's funny listening to the radio here because like everybody's schizophrenic because they hate Tkachuk, because they think he abandoned the Flames, but then they hate the Oilers more. So it's just like a schizophrenic back and forth of who they want to win. Because whenever I turn on the vehicle or either vehicle, it's always on sports radio. And sometimes I'm just too lazy to change it. So I'll just listen to it, the people who are calling in and stuff. And I find it amusing. But yeah, Aaron's definitely anyone but Oilers guy. And so we'll see what happens. But I think that McDavid deserves to win a cup, so I just want to see that happen as well, just as an aside.
Yeah. Or do you want to see it happen, or do you want to see it happen in Toronto?
I these guys like Crosby and McDavid and even Matthews, like I can't really see them being traded. We'll see, I guess, but I think it's unlikely. Well, I especially think it's unlikely with McDavid now that they're making the Stanley Cup playoffs. Like, I think if they had gone out first round or something, maybe. But, yeah, now I don't think it is.
I mean, it's different people, but this is the same organization that did sell Gretzky for $15 million and 3 or 4 other guys. I couldn't remember how many it was. Yeah.
Well, that's why Aaron was a huge Oilers fan because of Gretzky, as I'm sure most Canadians were. And when they did that, I think that was the beginning of the end for him. So
that was his first great betrayal in life.
That's exactly.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Well, there are predictions. 4-3, 4-3. I say Florida. You say Edmonton. But yeah, it looks like it's a pretty 50. I don't even know do you know what the betting lines are?
No.
They must be pretty close.
No idea. Yeah.
No, you're not making any investments on behalf of your family?
No. No, not at the moment. So we'll see. I can make a bet with you. Let's do it live on air. $50,000 a year.
Doll hairs. Yeah, I got those. It's kind of like I thought it was a little bit surprising that they are waiting so long to start the series.
It's so stupid.
Yeah, it's like a 5-day, but it's I'm kind of okay with it too, because in between the Bombers kick off tomorrow night, so excited for football to be back.
Yeah,
finally.
I don't care.
Well, I do, and I'm going to be talking about it on the podcast this summer, so everybody strap in.
Yeah, we'll put a mirror in front of you so you can talk to yourself about it.
That's fine. It's like every other day. Well, I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about tonight, Alissa.
Yeah, we don't really have many topics. What a absolute gong show this week has been in the political world and in the social conservative world, for sure. I don't even know where to start. I guess we could just start with the events, like the timing of the events.
Yeah, let's just do the timeline. You do the chronological timeline, and that way everyone can know, or refresh people's minds too, or listen to this later.
Okay, so on Friday, May 31st, Nate Erskine-Smith, who's a Liberal MP, he released a podcast episode that he did with Arnold Viersen, who is a Conservative MP in Northern Alberta, who is head of the Parliamentary Pro-Life Caucus, like a strong social conservative, has like 5 or 6 kids, and just all around good guy, very well known to be a social conservative, is always one that speaks at the March for Life, that kind of thing, has tabled many pro-life petitions, and the list goes on. And so they were talking about a variety of issues, but the Liberal MP brought up the issue of abortion because of how pro-life Arnold is. And so he asked him a few questions, pretty basic questions, like what kind of policies do you want to see passed in Parliament? What's your goal by being a pro-life member of Parliament? Things like that. Just pretty basic questions. They were not aggressive. And Arnold responded in a less than satisfactory way. I think that Arnold himself, I mean, I can't speak for him, but if I were to guess, he wouldn't be very happy with his responses. And you'll just have to listen to it yourself. It's on YouTube, and it's very easy to find if you just go on Twitter. I'm sure you'll find the whole saga there as well as the links. And anyway, so then OLO, so Pierre Poilievre's office and his advisors and everyone who works in his office got wind that Arnold had done this podcast after it was released. And we don't know exactly, but we can again guess that they forced Arnold to then release a statement, which he did on Saturday, so the next day. And the statement basically said, I was on this podcast and my what I said does not reflect the views of the leader or the Conservative Party members, and that under Pierre, the status quo will remain when it comes to abortion. So, of course, needless to say, when we saw that statement right now, Scott and I were pretty angry and upset. And just by the pure fact that, it's not shocking that OLO would force him to release a statement, but it's shocking that he would agree to it. So that, I think, is what got us the most. And so we just tweeted, this is an unacceptable statement, and here's why, and how dare you speak for Conservative Party members when we've passed multiple pro-life policies at convention, and they're part of the official party policy handbook for the Conservatives, and that, 47% of the base voted in favor of, Conservative government putting forward legislation on abortion, that kind of thing. And so then it blew up a little bit more. I was retweeted by Katie Telford, who is the chief of staff of Justin Trudeau, and multiple other journalists. And it just kind of blew up into a bigger issue. And then on Monday, I did a CBC interview, and there were multiple articles that came out about this. And then to make matters even worse, after Arnold had done the podcast, he emailed Nate and said that he felt ambushed by his questions, and that he'll never come on the podcast again. And to me, that was just like one mistake after another, because it wasn't like anyone who watched that would see that it wasn't an ambush whatsoever, and that he was just ill prepared to answer the questions, which is even more shocking since you're, the chair of the Parliamentary Pro-Life Caucus. And I don't want to, gang up on Arnold too much. I think that it probably was very difficult to be in his position, but it was just mistake after mistake after mistake, and it leads us to a bigger issue of what the hell is going on in the Conservative Party. Pierre's office came out in in specifically a Toronto Star article, just bashing social conservatives, basically saying, I don't need you. I won the leadership race without you. And that I've always been clear that reproductive rights won't be touched when I'm prime minister. And that's what it is. Like, just a very dictatorial approach, something that went even further than we've ever seen, even with Stephen Harper.
Or Aaron O'Toole.
But I just feel like Harper was known to have more of a kind of hard-headed personality than O'Toole. Like, O'Toole was more of a flip-flopper, didn't really know where he should go on this issue, really. And but he wasn't like a dictator, as, Harper kind of was seen to be, especially when it came to like putting forward pro-life bills and stuff, which I loved the fact that the Parliamentary Pro-Life Caucus and pro-life MPs didn't give an F about what he had to say and did it anyway. And hopefully they had that same approach with Pierre, because it's not going to be good for him or the Conservative base or the Conservative Party if this type of behavior continues. And that's basically where we are today. And now we're doing the podcast a couple of days later after this Gong show, talking about it all.
Yeah, there's a few things that that are disappointing about it. I'm not at all surprised that this was a response from the Office of Leader of the Opposition, the OLO. So for those that don't know, in Canada in 1985, there was an amendment under the Mulroney government to the Canada Elections Act. And what the amendment stated is that in order for you to have, like, Globe, Alissa, Conservative behind your name on the physical ballot for the riding in which you're a candidate, the executive director of that registered political party with Elections Canada has to sign a form saying, yes, Alissa Globe is in fact our candidate in this riding for this by-election or for this general federal election. And so what Justin Trudeau did back in 2014, he said, okay, from now on going forward, any new candidate who has been nominated that is pro-life, I will instruct the executive director of the party to not sign that paper. So it's not actually, a lot of people don't realize this, the Liberal Party of Canada is actually neutral officially on the issue of abortion. They don't have a policy that says that they are pro-abortion, and they don't have a policy that says they're pro-life, and they don't have a policy, or they don't have anywhere in their constitution as a political party that says that pro-lifers cannot run for nominations, win those nominations, and put forward private members' bills dealing with pro-life legislation and vote for them and have to be reprimanded. That's all from Justin Trudeau. Pierre Poilievre has learned so much from Justin Trudeau over the years. And one of the things that he's learned now is this wasn't said explicitly to me, but it was heavily implied to me that had Arnold Viersen not sent out that statement, that his nomination papers, because even though he's a sitting member of parliament, those papers still have to be signed by the executive director of the party. And it was heavily intimated to me that had he not put out that statement, that those papers would not have been signed. And so he could run, of course, as an independent, but he would not be able to run as a conservative. And, again, I can't speak for Arnold, but I can't speak with some authority on this because Alissa, yourself and myself, and then our friends who work full-time in the pro-life movement, whether in the political arm or the educational arm or the pastoral arm of the pro-life movement, we don't do it for the money. Like I'm a chartered professional accountant. I could be making way more money in public practice and most definitely in private practice, but I don't, because this is what I want to do because I feel called to do it. And I just kind of expect something similar, not exactly the same, but something similar for our pro-life members of parliament. And, when the rubber meets the road and you're faced with that question, like, I like to think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I like to think that I would say no, screw off. You can not sign my nomination papers. I don't care. I'm going to speak on this issue the way I want to speak on this issue and not sound like an extreme pro-abortionist like Justin Trudeau, which is what Pierre Poilievre sounds like. And I'm going to speak for the majority of Canadians who want some sort of legal restriction on abortion, whether it be sex-selective abortion, late-term abortion, pain capability abortion. Most definitely the majority of his constituents up there in Peace River, Westlock up in northern Alberta. And, consequences be damned, like maybe I don't win the riding, or maybe neither me or the conservative candidate you choose wins the riding, or maybe I do win the riding and you perhaps maybe learn a lesson. And I especially hope that going forward that the pro-life members of parliament can band together on this a little bit, because a lot of them represent pretty safe conservative ridings, particularly in rural Western Canada, like Arnold Viersen. And that was a really big disappointment. So like everything coming from the OLO, that's to be expected, unfortunately. But I was expecting a little bit more. The other thing too, again, not to super harp on Arnold, but if you look at the podcast, like the answers to the questions that Nate was asking, which I don't think were crazy questions, frankly, were wanting a little bit. And I think it's a bit of a concern. Like, what it was a wake up call for me, and I don't mind talking about this on the podcast. It's a wake up call for me that I don't know if people out there have noticed or not, or maybe it's just me, that a lot of the pro life members of parliament don't really talk about abortion a whole lot. You don't really see them at the March for Life, whether it be in Ottawa or the provincial marches for life. They're not doing a whole lot of speeches. In fact, they're doing no speeches about it in the House of Commons. When there is an abortion bill like banning sex selective abortion, you have Karen Vecchio talking, she seems like a nice enough person. I get it, but she's talking absolute nonsense up there. Like, really, like that's the person we're going to put up to talk about this, and she's not even pro-life herself. I think it's time for pro-life members of parliament to start saying the A word, like start talking about abortion, pointing out the extreme position of Justin Trudeau, pointing out the multiple pro-life policies that exist, voted on by a large majority of delegates to consecutive back to back to back to back to back Conservative Party of Canada policy conventions, whether it be defunding abortion overseas, being against sex selective abortion, ensuring that government funding for student jobs don't have an abortion attestation, things of this nature. In the statement that Arnold was forced to say, it was about Conservative Party policy. Is Pierre going to follow that? Is Pierre going to commit to defunding $1.5 billion in funding of overseas abortions, many of which are found to be done illegally in particular countries in Africa? That's another question in my mind too. So I think that it's disappointing that happened. It's disappointing to see the fear take over the conviction of some of our staunchest pro-life MPs, and I think it's a wake-up call that these pro-life members of parliament have to start talking about abortion on their own terms in public, not all the time, not all day, every day, or every week or something like that, but most definitely a few times a year. Because if you don't, and you just talk about it, in closed circles and conversations with us, or we need a law or something like that, then that muscle begins to atrophy.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what we saw.
Yeah, there's so much to say about this. And the first thing that comes to mind is sort of like a Leslyn Lewis, right? Like when she first came out of nowhere and started going on interviews and was asked about abortion by the media, every single time she did an amazing job. She was well-spoken. She was able to answer the questions very fluently and intellectually, and the majority of conservatives, and I would even argue just Canadians, agreed with her because what she said was agreeable. So she talked about supporting crisis pregnancy centers and against sex selective abortion and against coerced abortion and things like that. And as some of these things are part of the official party policy, it's kind of crazy to say I won't talk about it when these are official policies. These are what conservatives have told you, the Conservative Party, that they want to be in platforms, policies that they want to be put forward. So if you're going to say no, then you're basically saying no to the Conservative members who spend thousands upon thousands of dollars to go to convention and pass policies that are important to them. This isn't the Pierre Poilievre Conservative Party. This is the Conservative Party for Canadians, and Canadians get to decide, not Poilievre what to, talk about in the election, and it shouldn't be that way. And when you're going to disqualify candidates on a regular basis for a variety of reasons and piss off a whole lot of people, when you're going to squash any type of talking points when it comes to abortion and or social issues in general, and when you just harp over and over and over mind-numbingly about the carbon tax, oh my gosh, how is this going to go on for another year? And will conservatives be able to stand it? Because the unrest is growing, and it kind of reminds me of O'Toole's fate. And the only thing that happened with O'Toole was that the only difference was that O'Toole lost the election, and maybe it won't be the outcome of Pierre solely because people hate Trudeau more than they hate Pierre, but it certainly won't be because Pierre has some sort of winning strategy, because the carbon tax isn't it, people. It just isn't.
Yeah, and I'm against the carbon tax, don't get me wrong, but here in Manitoba, we more or less...
He talks about it so much, I almost am in favor of it because I hate how much they talk about it. I'm like, screw you, give me a carbon tax. It's so annoying. Ugh. And then, just the things that they talk about, nobody cares. Nobody cares and nobody understands what you're talking about. And then there's only so much you can talk about how corrupt Trudeau is. They've banged on that drum over and over and over again. We get it. He did blackface. He's corrupt. Whatever. We already heard this multiple elections in a row. So you think that just harping on a carbon tax and talking about how corrupt Trudeau is some sort of a winning strategy, and they're all patting themselves on the back because they're ahead in the polls. But it's solely, that should show you how much people dislike Trudeau. The fact that they think that this is some sort of amazing campaign that's currently being run by OLO is laughable. It's utterly laughable.
We live in a world that grows through communication.
Every connection comes from a dream to be heard and realized.
To welcome a better future. What are your dreams?
LaRosse Media will help communicate your vision through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Start building connections to your future audience. Visit larossemedia.com
and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
A couple hours before we did this podcast, we had another pro-life candidate who was disqualified in Calgary, who, from my understanding, had roughly a quarter of the memberships that were sold. There were 5 or 7 different candidates running in that nomination, so there was a really good chance that he was going to win that nomination. I'm hearing rumblings of other former pro-life members of Parliament who were attempting to run in different nominations again in Alberta, and were receiving phone calls told to not run there. I'm hearing rumblings of other, prominent pro-lifers who are wanting to run in nominations for non-held, not currently held by conservative ridings. And, already people in the party, full-time staffers in the party, talking about how to disqualify these candidates. So, but it's also not the trend that I'm starting to notice is that as predominantly pro-lifers and social conservatives are getting disqualified. I think that's for a few reasons. Number one, because they actually have a base to sell to. Number two, they have organizations like Right Now, which continues to grow by leaps and bounds in our database. And so we have more in the last round it's kind of interesting because in 2019, there were ridings where it's we have 5 support, and there are a few ridings that are still like that for us, and we still have a lot of work to do. And that's something else we can talk about. But there's a lot of ridings where it's we only have 5 or 10 people in the riding, but hey, we'll send out an e-blast and a text blast and sell memberships for you to those 5 or 10 people. And maybe there's a few that will volunteer for you. In fact, there was one lady, she was running for a nomination in a non-held riding because a MP had resigned, so a safe conservative riding, and we only had 15 people, supporters in that riding, which is not where it needs to be. It should be 1,500, not 15. And we're working toward that. But there was this one lady in our database, and she fell in love with our pro-life candidate that we were supporting, which she's a very lovable candidate. And she went out there and sold like 100 or 150 memberships for this candidate alone, which is incredible. So like you do find those golden nuggets quite a bit in our database. But what I'm noticing is that, well, now for a lot of these candidates, I'm able to send, I'm able to email and text blast a list of 50, 150, 250 people in the riding, which is way better than just, 5 or 10. Still, it needs to get, in the thousands. But it's not just the pro-life candidates and the social conservatives candidates being disqualified. Again, disproportionately, because I think they're just better candidates overall, and they sell more memberships, but also non-SOCONs. And I think the reason for it is because those candidates that are not socially conservative are also being disqualified because they know, by they, I mean people in the OLO, people in Party HQ, they know that if they win that nomination, let's say that safe conservative riding, or that riding that as of today is likely to flip conservative in the general federal election in October 2025, are not going to be just brain dead, trained barking seals that are happy clappy in question period. They're actually going to want to do things. And I really don't think they want that. I think they just want, as one former MP told me today, they just want a bunch of bobbleheads.
Yeah, that is extremely accurate. We should make bobbleheads and sell them as a fundraiser, because that is super accurate.
That's actually a really good idea. Did you just come up with that now?
Oh my goodness. But yeah, I think that's very accurate. Like, and I just want to explain to those listening what it actually entails to run in a nomination. Because, for example, today Wyatt Claypool was disqualified for the riding of Calgary Signal Hill, as was Leela Ahir, who is a former UCP MLA and cabinet minister.
Sorry, can I just like quickly jump into that, because I think this is really important and it highlights what I was talking about. So Leela Ahir is a former UCP MLA cabinet minister, no friend to social conservatives. Oh my goodness, Chantal Dion was running against her in the nomination, in the UCP nomination, because the UCP, like a normal political party, has open nominations no matter what. And so in the lead up to the nomination race, Chantal had sold like a boatload of memberships, and then there was the AGM where you vote on who's going to be on the board of directors, which you could talk about, Alissa, because you're on your provincial board of directors as well. So she had sent, all these members that she had signed up to the AGM. She had a slate of people that were supportive of her to go on the board, and I think she won every single seat, and the closest margin was 10-1. And shortly after that AGM, Leela here said, "You know what? I don't think I'm going to run in this nomination," because they had an open nomination process, which isn't universal, unfortunately, in the UCP, but is a lot more common in the UCP than it is in the Conservative Party of Canada, certainly under Pierre Poilievre. But the one point I'm trying to make is that Leela is very much not our friend on social conservative issues. And I would still maintain that unless she did something absolutely corrupt, which I've never took her to be like a corrupt person, and you're in Alberta, and correct me if I'm wrong, I just took her to be, social, like a cultural,
like a red
Marxist,
Tory.
Yeah. Well, even beyond that.
Yeah.
She shouldn't be disqualified in that nomination. Like, unless she did like actually broke rules, she should not be disqualified in that nomination. Let the members decide. So it's not just a SOCON issue. I think it's a pro grassroots issue. And for us social conservatives and pro-lifers, when we have a party that has ingrained in its constitution and nomination rules a pro grassroots perspective, we tend to win like 95% of the time anyway, because we're the ones that actually have the numbers, because we're the ones that have the majority on side on those issues of abortion and assisted suicide. So anyway, I just wanted to quickly interject.
Every time they disqualify a candidate, it just shows how big of that they're such big losers that they can't actually win themselves. Like they are backing loser candidates who can't win on their own merit. They have to disqualify their opponents in order to win. Like, that does not scream, winners to me. And, but like you said, they don't necessarily want winners or people who can actually, move up or be well versed or well said or become stars in the caucus. They want, like you said, clapping seals and bobbleheads, and
that are dependent on them, because if you can't win your own nomination, but they more or less rigged it for you, they own you now.
Yeah, exactly.
So like Jeremy Nixon, who's now probably, unfortunately, going to win. I hope he doesn't, but unfortunately, he's probably going to now win that nomination. He's owned. Yeah. He's owned by the OLO. He's not his
happily
own person.
so. Happily so.
He can't be his own man.
Yeah. And it's also like so mind-numbing and hypocritical when you hear Pierre stand up in question period and talk about transparency and common sense and freedom.
The freest country in the world. The freest country in the world. You can't even make it the freest party in Canada. How the hell are you going to make it the freest country in the world?
It's such a joke. Like, does he actually think conservatives are stupid enough to buy his fake one-liners and actually do the opposite when it comes to running the party? It's very disturbing.
I mean, so far, unfortunately, yes. But I think a lot of Canadians are really busy. I think a lot of Canadians are really pissed off at the Justin Trudeau government, and rightfully so. But this shtick that the Pierre Poilievre people are running is going to run out, and it's going to bite them in the ass hard.
And let's just say, even if they do win the election, like, how long is this government going to last? Because you can't, it's unsustainable to run a party like this. Like that, with those types of actions and narratives and things like that. So, people think that the be all and end all is winning the election. Actually, it's not. Harper, was there for 10 years. Will Pierre be there for 10 years if they keep it up? Definitely not. There's no way.
Well, let's quickly talk about this, and we should definitely circle back and we will to like what actually is entailed in running in a nomination, because I think that's really important for what Claypool said in the Western Standard. But you just made a point that I also wanted to highlight, because when we sent out our e-blast and text blast, we had hundreds, not quite 1,000 people respond to us, but I think it was between texting and emailing, it was several hundred, maybe around 500 or so. And the vast majority were like, this is awful, not surprising. I'm writing Pierre right now. There was about 15, maybe 20 from my count that said, the Conservatives just need to win, and then we can do this and we can do that. Do what? Like, he's like, if he's not going to say it before the election, he sure as hell isn't going to do it after the election. And so I just want to highlight to people that, from our organization's point of view, specifically right now, we're concerned about the two issues of abortion and assisted suicide. So unless you're going to give us policies on that, like, not super interested in carrying water for the guy, I'm sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry. So on abortion, it's completely the same as Justin Trudeau. He has the same exact extreme pro-abortion stance. That's not going to change after the election, no matter no matter how many seats they have. If they have 220, 180, doesn't matter. Now it matters if a lot of those, if there's a majority of pro-lifers, because now that changes. But those pro-lifers aren't dependent upon Pierre getting elected, most certainly not dependent on Pierre not talking abortion to get elected, because what happens when they do get elected and a private member's pro-life bill comes forward and they're voting on it, that's public record. Like, that's way more telling than anything you can tweet or say or do in an interview is your voting record. You have to stand by that. That's for the public, and it should be for the public. The other thing too is on assisted suicide, yes, the Conservatives are better than the Liberals on it, but marginally. Like, the Liberals want to, they can't, because they're blocked because they have a minority parliament, and even the NDP are against this, and credit where credit's due. The NDP are against the expansion of the criteria of assisted suicide to those with mental health challenges. So are the Conservatives, and so that together enough is that together enough with the, I can't remember if that, because the Conservatives have 120. The NDP have 25. I don't think you have Bloc. Like, maybe you have some Liberals in there, or I don't, or maybe they just have all the Conservatives and the NDP going for. Well, no, sorry, correct me if I'm wrong. The Liberals did introduce the bill from pressure from the Conservatives and the NDP to delay the expansion of assisted suicide to those with mental health challenges until, I believe, 2027. So the Liberals want to do it, but there is public pressure to not do it. They could have not put that bill forward because they would have enough votes between them and the Bloc. They have a majority in the House to not do that bill or defeat that bill, but they didn't. So effectively, in terms of realpolitik, it's not that much different than the Conservatives. And the thing that really pisses me off, and I've talked about this in podcasts before, like the milieu out there, the environment out there amongst the Canadian electorate right now when it comes to the issue of assisted suicide, not only do they not want to see expansions for the criteria of assisted suicide, they want to roll things back. But the Conservatives are only promising to not expand. They're not promising to roll things back, which is actually also in the party policy. So when we have some of our supporters say, oh, well, when it comes to, MAID, when it comes to assisted suicide, we need to get the Conservatives in there because they're going to be so much better than the Liberals on the issue. They're going to be better than the Liberals on the issue, but like marginally. And the margins are super thin. And in terms of like actual production of policy and legislation, right now, at this very moment, it's the same. So I just wanted to highlight for people what do you think a Pierre Poilievre government is actually going to do when it comes to abortion and assisted suicide? Basically, nothing's going to change in this country, more or less. So I think that's really, really important for people to realize that. I'm not saying don't vote Conservative. If you have a pro-life Conservative candidate, absolutely vote for them. There's no question about that. And we will support them and help them door knock and all that type of stuff, even if they're scared of saying anything on it. Like, the votes do matter, and at the end of the day, like, that is bedrock for us. But anyway, maybe
that's something we've always talked about. Like, even when we were talking about O'Toole flip-flopping and it was during that election, like, we never said don't vote Conservative. You're not voting for O'Toole, you're not voting for Pierre, you're voting for your candidate,
your local candidate.
And so we're definitely not saying don't vote Conservative. Will always support the pro-life candidate in your riding. The importance of understanding where these leaders are at is there's multiple reasons for it. And one of the main reasons is to have some backlash against it, because, these populist leaders, they do respond to backlash, and it is important. And we saw that with Pierre just with the Trans for Kids thing, because he went from being like, oh, it's a provincial issue, I don't want to talk about this, carbon tax, to then being like, no, parents have a right and parents are the primary educators and all the talking points, right? Because there was that public pressure. And the same could be said for any issue, really. But also, do I really want Pierre talking about these issues? No. That's where the strength of the caucus comes in, because Pierre doesn't know what he's talking about. He's not well versed in these issues. All he cares about are economic issues. That's the only thing that, keeps him up at night and gets his gears going. It's not what gets a lot of people's gears going. Maybe housing, inflation, things like that. But like the carbon tax, I mean, it only goes so far, like I said. But I just want to read some of the quotes that he said with regards to abortion, because we were talking about it broadly, but here are the direct quotes. When I am Prime Minister, no laws or rules will be passed that restrict women's reproductive choices. And then Poilievre also sought to remind the social conservative wing of the party that he doesn't need it in his corner. Poilievre pointed out that during his party's 2022 leadership race, he made numerous comments against any laws restricting abortion and won the contest decisively. And then a few options regarding Arnold's podcast and statement. A few options are available. The Tory MPs could eject Viersen from caucus using legislation known as the Reform Act. Poilievre could prevent Viersen from seeking re-election as a Conservative, or he could simply become a political pariah, denied any chance to speak in the Commons, sit on committees, or receive support for any of his backbench endeavors. So these are the types of things that are being thrown around in the media. These are the things that OLO is telling the media. And it's very important not only to have backlash against Poilievre's comments, but also to support Arnold, despite the multiple mistakes that he made. At the end of the day, he is a strong pro-life MP, and he doesn't deserve this disrespect from a new leader, especially with all the good work that he's done on restrictions for assisted suicide and also for against sexual exploitation online, which he's been very successful with. So there's been lots of different issues that he's championed, and it's really important that these threats don't actually come to fruition. Yeah,
no, all good points. I know we bounced around a little bit here, but maybe let's swing on back to like a nomination, what that entails, because I think that's really important for people to understand as well.
Yeah, because like, when we say, a candidate is disqualified, people might be really angry. Oh, we want a candidate like this running in our riding. But I just want to give you a picture as to what specifically it entails with regards to Wyatt in Calgary Signal Hill, which does apply to Garrett Van Dorland and others. But
it will unfortunately apply to others in probably the not too distant future as well.
Yeah. So basically, like, Wyatt has been door knocking every single day for the past year and a half in the frigid Alberta winters, in the rain and the sun, regardless. He's been out there door knocking. He's been selling memberships. He's been making connections. He goes out to events to meet people, to sell memberships, to talk about the issues. He's got a broad coalition of people on his side, people that I wouldn't necessarily work with per se, but that's, what you do as a candidate. You want to get support from as many different areas as you can. But this is backbreaking work. It's very difficult to come home from your job at 5 o'clock or whatever it is, and then go out door knocking, door to door. A lot of people don't know what you're talking about. A lot of people don't know what nominations are. Some people aren't even conservative, and you're trying to not only get their support, but actually sell them a membership at the door, have them pay you so that they can become members. And not only that, but then vote for you at the nomination meeting. It costs money to create a website and to do all the things that lead up to a nomination is extremely difficult.
Take time off of work. To spend your own money, have all these door knocking or phone calling or groups that are phone calling for you regularly. Like it costs money. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of psychological and emotional wherewithal from you. And then you do all of this, you go through all the hoops, you sell all these memberships, you do everything that you can. And then a couple weeks before the nomination meeting, you get an email saying, basically everything you did doesn't matter and you're now disqualified and we don't have to give you a reason why. Like, that's what happens when these candidates are disqualified. It's not like they just thought to themselves, oh, I'm going to apply to be a candidate today, and then sent in their papers and waited for a response. These people have been grinding for like over a year to become a successful nomination candidate, and then the rug is pulled out under them like a week, 2 weeks beforehand. And with Garrett's situation, like, he was a frickin' conservative staffer. Like, he was literally working for the party that disqualified him. Like, you can't make this up. It's just asinine. It's absolutely insane. Former MPs, even Leela Ahir, like, I never thought I would be sitting here sympathetic to Leela, but she's a former MLA and cabinet minister. Like, what are you smoking that you think that it would be okay to disqualify these people? Sabrina Maddow, like, we did not support her. We talked against, recruiting her as a candidate. She's a writer for the National Post, and she's severely pro-abortion. She says that Justin Trudeau is not pro-abortion enough. That's the type of candidate that Alyssa's about to talk about here.
But she's the one who, like, she wasn't disqualified, but she knew, she could see in front of her that, the party was favoring a certain candidate, a candidate that we support. But it doesn't do us any favors, or conservatives any favors,
or
when
that
you're
candidate
rigging a nomination for anybody. Let the nominations be clear and transparent and open like they are supposed to be. Stop effing around with them, or else it's going to come back and bite you in the ass. And the more you do it, the more disgruntled conservatives all over the country are going to be. Do you think that the thousands of people who bought memberships for these nomination candidates are just going to be like, okay, we're okay that you're disqualified? No, they're going to be angry. Like, think about this. Use your brain.
Well, look what happened in Oxford, right? Yeah. Like, don't get me wrong. RPAN is an upgrade from a social conservative pro-life point of view from David McKenzie. There's no doubt about that. And we'll see when the votes come in the rest of this parliament and the future parliaments. But, I'm pretty sure that's going to be the case. That being said, because of all the skullduggery, I suppose, that was happening in the riding, They almost lost that in the by-election, a riding that besides a vote split in 1993 hadn't gone Liberal since like the 50s, maybe the early 60s, have been basically like one of the safest Conservative ridings in all of Ontario, most certainly in Southern Ontario. You almost lost it in a by-election because of your pride, of your arrogance, of your cockiness, whatever the case might be. You couldn't accept that Garrett Van Dorlen was by far the more popular candidate in the riding. That's not a slight against Arpan. That's just to Garrett's strength, right? He's just the more popular guy. He like probably, and this is crazy to think about a riding like Oxford, he was probably going to win that nomination on the first ballot, which is insane. Like, why wouldn't you want to have that type of hustle in your caucus? Well, the reason you don't want to have that type of hustle in your caucus is because if you don't stick to your principles and stick to your word, those people are going to hustle against you because they're not doing it for the money. Garrett Van Dorlen isn't doing it for the money. He's now happily married and has another job, no problem. But he's doing it because of what he believes in. And the more people that are in the caucus, whether it's 180 or 220 or even just 99, like what Stephen Harper left in 2015, that's dangerous to certain people in the OLO and to people that are close to Pierre Poilievre. It's Pierre raves and rants and whatever about gatekeepers here and gatekeepers there. He sees gatekeepers everywhere except in
the mirror.
So she's the biggest gatekeeper of all by looking at himself in the bloody mirror. That's the biggest gatekeeper you got to deal with.
And we're ranting about how the Conservative Party is currently run, not because we want the Conservatives to lose, but because we want to hold them to a higher standard. We want them to be better. We want them to be the best that they can be. And that must include the grassroots. You can't walk all over people and stomp all over candidates and throw policies to the side and just unilaterally decide what you're going to push and forbid every single caucus member to speak about anything that's important to them except about the carbon tax or the economy, and expect members to just sit by and be like, oh yeah, this is great, this is a winning strategy, we love you, all hail Poilievre. Like, yeah, maybe you're getting thousands of people at your speeches and you won decisively with the leadership race, but that popularity will not last if this is how you treat people. It just can't.
Especially when Justin Trudeau's gone, because this party right now, being the Conservative Party of Canada, is severely addicted to Trudeau bad.
Yeah.
And after the next election, there's going to be a leadership race in the Liberal Party of Canada. Whether the Liberals win or not, there's going to be a leadership race in the Liberal Party of Canada. Mm-hmm. And, you could have a leader that comes in that is a lot more in the vein of like a John Turner or maybe a Jean Chrétien, although Chrétien was pretty heavy-handed in nominations after he won in 1990. But let's stick with Turner or even Mike Pearson or someone like that. And you could have a situation where maybe that leader says, hey, I'm not pro-life, I'm not going to introduce this legislation, but if you're pro-life and you want to run for the party and whatever and put forward legislation, I'm not going to punish you. Basically, if you want to be a John McKay or free John McKay again and have more of him.
John McKay is just a shell of himself at this point, so I don't think there's any freeing him except death.
But don't I guess what I'm trying to say is that right now I think a lot of people, maybe including Pierre Poilievre himself, is saying like, I don't really need you.
Yeah.
But it's hard for him to say that because of all, and it's difficult because right now, like, let's be honest, like we talk about this publicly, so I don't mind saying it. Like, we have a database of 40,000 pro-lifers across Canada. Like, that's obviously not enough. We know that's not enough. Like, the goal is to be, 7 figures. And we have plans to make that happen, before 2030, and we're working hard toward it. COVID delayed it a little bit, but, we're well on track. If every pro-lifer, if every Canadian who's eligible to vote that currently votes for the Conservative Party of Canada, where, the pro-life issue is their number one issue. They're not a single issue voter, but they're a number one issue voter. And you have, let's say a pro-life Liberal candidate versus a pro-abortion Conservative candidate, or a pro-life Conservative candidate that's not allowed to do anything. Don't think that those pro-lifers aren't going to switch. What I'm trying to say is that we need like the Conservative Party of Canada, and especially pro-life MPs who sit within the Conservative caucus, really need to start pushing this. Is what do things look like post Trudeau? And according to some articles today, post Trudeau might be before the upcoming election. And that might be a really big concern. Like, because I'm sure they have, because this does happen. I'm sure that they have the election narrative written out day by day already for October 2025, for when the next general federal election is going to be. That's the Conservative Party of Canada. I'm sure the other parties do too. I can guarantee you, it's all about how Justin Trudeau bad, and if he's gone, I don't know. What do you talk about?
Nature communicates with us in a universal language. The sunrise starts a new day. The sunset marks our accomplishments.
The most beautiful communication is where the speaker and the listener match perfectly and understand the same message.
Your future audience is waiting to hear from you. What message do you need to share?
At LaRosse Media, we fashion beautiful communications through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Create your own most beautiful message. Visit larosmedia.com and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
When we sent out an e-blast yesterday, we did ask people to have some, show some backlash to Poilievre, and some of the people CC'd us on their emails to the OLO, and I just want to read some of them right now. Maybe Scott, you can jump in as well, but
Yeah.
Some of them were really good, and some of them were by former, presidents of their EDAs, doctors, different members of society that hold higher positions. So as a member of the Conservative Party, I am deeply upset by the comments recently made in the Toronto Star. If members are not allowed to vote according to their conscience or put forward potential legislation that represents the interests and beliefs of their constituents, how can we claim to be living in a democracy with freedom of speech and conscience? The declaration that social conservatives are not a necessary part of the party is sheer ostracism. If you want my vote for you to become Prime Minister, I suggest you choose to act in a less tyrannical manner and decide to support human freedoms as laid out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights under international law. Many thanks.
Okay, here's another one. I like this one. I like them all. Pierre, we've met multiple times. As a longtime Conservative member, activist, donor, volunteer, and delegate, it's a lot of things, I'm extremely disappointed in your recent actions. You should know better. First, one of the fundamental differences between our party and the NDP Liberals is that our party believes in rational discussion, freedom of conscience, actual diversity of thought, and our democratic processes. Is this still true? Regardless of these specific issues, in general, we are supposed to be a principled and democratic party. When you muzzle our elected members of parliament, restrict free votes, or oppose rational discussion and common sense proposals, then you're acting like a liberal. Second, the clear majority of Canadians actually supports common sense pro-life policies. I like the use of common sense in there. And only small minority supports the radical pro-abortion status quo. When you speak in favor of this liberal status quo, you impress no one and actually alienate many current and potential voters. Find a way to articulate a positive message that taps into this majority. Third, at conventions, our grassroots have repeatedly rejected radical policies and supported common sense proposals. Our CPC founding principles and policy are also socially conservative, whether you realize it or not. Our party membership and base of support includes large percentage who are pro-life. Do you know your grassroots? As our leader, you should focus on positive message and what unites us. You should not be bashing or pushing away a significant part of your base and of our party. Have you not learned from past experience? Divided we are weak and united we are strong. If you divide our base, they won't support Liberals, but they won't support us by donating and volunteering. And they might even stay home instead of voting or vote for the PPC or Christian Heritage Party. I expect a response, and I expect you to reiterate that our party is not like the NDP Liberals, by your words and by your actions. Respectfully.
Another one. While I appreciate your many attributes, would you please respect the majority of MPs in the Conservative caucus that are pro-life? For example, MP Arnold Viersen, for whom I greatly admire for his unwavering pro-life convictions. Please note, I would like to provide more financial support for the CPC, as I am pleased with my local MP. However, as a CPC leader, when you state your unwavering support for the status quo of abortion in our land, it really makes me think twice regarding making substantial financial contributions to the CPC. Yours truly, past CPC EDA president blank.
Dear Mr. there I go. Dear Mr. Poilievre, I am deeply concerned about your supposed policies regarding conservative pro-life Canadians. It seems to me that some of these views may align more closely with those of Justin Trudeau than with the majority of the population in Canada. While Mr. Trudeau is openly hostile toward the pro-life crowd, what I hear from you is not much different. Remember that your birth mother chose life for you under difficult circumstances. You owe it to the others in the same circumstance. I am voting pro-life. Thanks and regards.
Okay, and just one more here. As one of your constituents and as a physician who cares for children with developmental and neurological concerns, I am gravely concerned about incremental hostilities towards social conservative viewpoints and those politicians who hold them. This is my notice that I will not be supporting the Conservatives in future elections as I have in the past until this changes. So a little bit more hardcore, but like, seriously, it's pissing off people. And I'm glad that they're getting this messaging. There needs to be this backlash. And so I'm really glad that people responded and actually wrote and hammered his office with these emails, because you know, the people who are in favor of the status quo of abortion on demand until birth, who are in favor of sex-selective abortion and late-term abortion, are an extremely small minority. Extremely small. The majority of Canadians want restrictions, are against sex-selective, are against late-term, that kind of thing. And then there are millions of Canadians who are also fully pro-life. So when you're saying that you support the status quo, you're really on side with an extremely small portion of the population that usually are have mental health issues, if you've ever been to a pro-abortion rally, because that's who you're appeasing.
Yeah, and you know what, Alissa, I'm really glad and impressed, I would say, with the emails that we got from people. Like, this was just a small sampling. We got dozens, if not hundreds, of emails and texts. Well, no, we got hundreds and hundreds of emails and texts from our supporters who responded lickety-split within less than 24 hours of getting the e-blast or text blast from us. With, you know, some of them didn't share their notes and emails that they sent to Pierre Poilievre's office, but a lot did, and that was a small sample, and I think that's a fairly representative sample of what people shared with us. And I'm just very impressed with the professionalism, some of the stats that they pull out, some of the talking points that they use, and they're all different, right? And it's really important. Like, you could tell, you could talk to other pro-life groups and organizations and pro-life staffers, but it's really important that when you're communicating with your member of parliament or a leader of a specific political party, that you use your own words, right? You can use, like, you know, certain statistics or, you know, turns of phrase or something like that provided to you, for example, by, you know, ourselves at Right Now, or maybe our friends at We Need a Law. But if you're just sending like a pre-written email, staffers just throw that out because they say you've put no effort into it, you've put no thought into it. Yeah, we know where you are. Yeah. They might keep track of it, but it doesn't impress them. It doesn't make an impression on them as much as an email that's written in your own words. And you know what? Frankly, like, I think some of these are written far better than I could write.
Yeah.
On their behalf, anyway.
They're not better than I can write, but.
A lot of them are personal. Like, there's a one supporter of ours that knows Pierre personally. They go far back, because I know they both go far back in the Conservative Party of Canada together. There was the one that you read out. One of the ones that you read out is a constituent of Pierre's, and I think they know each other personally. So it's a lot better to use your own words, and I think that these are very effective messages.
Absolutely. So that's roughly what we've been dealing with for the last, week or few days, I guess, since the weekend. And, as much as we want feedback to Pierre, we also really encourage our listeners and our supporters to also give this feedback to your pro-life member of parliament, because it's important that they stand up to this tyranny as well, because they are a majority. Pierre and his OLO are, a certain number of people, and I can guarantee you there are way more pro-life MPs than there are of them. So if Arnold called his bluff and said, fine, don't sign my nomination papers, and if pro-life members of parliament stood up to him like they did to Aaron O'Toole, things would be a lot different, and they wouldn't be forced to be muzzled on a regular basis, because I can guarantee you they're not happy about it. They're absolutely not happy. They might be obsessed with winning the election, so it might be a consolation that they're willing to do for the time being. But at the end of the day, if this is how they're going to be forced to be an MP, they're not going to be happy about it. So it's important for their constituents and members of the Canadian public to respond and say, we want you to stand up to this. This is not how we want our party to be run, and this is not what we expect in a leader.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really solid point. I feel like the pro-life members of parliament could have avoided a situation like this had they publicly stood up for someone like Garrett Van Dorlen when he was going through his nomination troubles a year ago, when the Conservative Party of Canada was actually behind the Liberals in polling. It's only a year ago where the Conservatives were usually 2, 3, sometimes 5 points behind the Liberals. So that would have been the time to do it. It's a lot more difficult to do it now when you're now a year closer to the election, and you have a fifth, though it seems to be shrinking a little bit, but you have a 15-point gap. I mean, that's not insignificant. It makes it more difficult to do this type of work, both internally and externally, when the party that you've been a part of probably your whole life is on the doorstep of knocking on the door of government for the first time in 10 years. So I understand it, but at the same time, are you there to cut carbon taxes? Which, if you are, fine by me, but are you there for something higher, for something more important? And there's various ways to go about it. Like, it's not like there's one way for these pro-life MPs to push back. There are a variety of ways, but there does need to be a pushback, and they do have to start talking about the issue in a more, controlled, nuanced, professional way. But they're going to have to start talking about the issue more, or else if they think things are going to be tough now before the election, just wait till after the election.
Yeah, like the Liberals are anti-choice. They don't allow their MPs to vote according to their conscience or according to their beliefs. They force them to vote a certain way. They voted against a bill that was against coerced abortion. They voted against a bill that would have put people who murder women and babies behind bars for a longer period of time. They voted against a bill like that. They voted against a bill condemning sex-selective abortions. These are not pro-choice people. They are specifically anti-choice. Women don't choose to be murdered. They don't choose to be coerced or forced to get abortions. MPs should not be forced to vote a certain way. That is specifically anti-choice. And it's just purely, misogynistic and degrading to be in support of sex-selective abortion, to say that it's a woman's right to choose to kill women. Like, it's just a bizarre stance. These are easy things to rail against. But instead, every time the Liberals bring up abortion, which they do on a regular basis because they know they can win on it, because they get absolutely no opposition. People think, oh, the Liberals bring up this issue all the time because it's a winning issue for them. No, they bring up the issue all the time because they know you're going to be friggin' mutes and not challenge them in any way. And that's why they bring it up. So actually get your act together, get some good talking points, be the official opposition, and then win government, and then be proactive on the issue in a way that Canadians want.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. I think that's
I'm telling you, Scott.
Yeah.
I'm forcing you.
Yeah, I have all the power. Yeah. Well, I mean, this was a very ranty podcast.
Oh my goodness. We needed to vent with you people.
I think deservedly so.
Yeah.
And it'd be great to get some feedback on it. And I am interested to see what people who regularly listen to this podcast, that's you, Mom.
Hi, Mom. My mom doesn't even listen to it. So, hi, Scott's mom.
Yeah. what everyone kind of thinks about this issue, and I'm curious. I'm curious as what people kind of want from the pro-life MPs as well. You know, I would be very curious to hear that. Like, what do you want the pro-life MPs to do? You know, kind of realistically on this stuff.
Yeah. Well, say nothing and do nothing and believe in nothing, of course.
Yeah, naturally. Yes.
All right. Well, we hopefully will have better news and better stories and better talking points next podcast. And it will be a little bit more uplifting and cheery. And if it isn't, I will make it be uplifting and cheery in some way. Maybe I'll just flash my baby. You could bring your kids on and we'll just...
I thought you were going to say something else. But it's a good thing it's your baby that you're flashing.
That would not be cheery or uplifting.
Sometimes our language gets colorful enough that we get certain ratings on this podcast. So we need to... Now you're going to be a guest on the whatever podcast for your OnlyFans account.
I would love that,
Yeah.
But we will talk to you next time in a couple weeks. Make sure that you subscribe so you know when the next podcast comes out. And we'll see you next time.
Go Bombers.